All right, guys, welcome back to Discovering Eden. My name is Brandon.
And I'm Jonathan.
And unfortunately, this episode we don't have Marty with us, but that is okay. We might get through this just a little bit.
Not emotionally, but
he will be back. He will
Yes.
be back for the next episode that we will be hinting at the end of this episode. So, before we start things off, I'll pray, bumper, get into it. Get it, got it, good. Let's go. All right, dear God, thank you that we're able to sit down, do this, and be able to share it with people on the internet. And first and foremost, lift your name high, Jesus. And, during this series, we're going to be talking about some interesting and fun things with different creatures and tying it into different mythologies and different things like that. But we want your name to be lifted high, Lord, and whatever that you want to reveal to whoever may be listening or watching this, that you would reveal it and that you would help us speak what's on our minds and our hearts, and that it be able to be conveyed well. And I just pray that you would just be with us as we go through these things, and that whatever is from you would be magnified, lifted high, and whatever is from us, that it would be pleasing to you. And yeah, pray this in Jesus' name. It's not the greatest prayer, but hey, it's a prayer.
it had that
Inside joke to what we were doing pre-recording. And
You'll probably hear it 3 more times in the episode.
Honestly, we need to start recording this beforehand, just so at least there's some bloopers and whatever. But then that requires editing, and that's we'll just have to get Aiden to do that at some point. But anyway, we'll get into the bumper, and then we'll get and dive right into it. All right, so to give a little bit of a recap on what we talked about last week and the week before. So obviously we're in the creature series, as you can obviously tell by the title of the video you're either watching or listening to. Mm-hmm. So hi, it's been a couple episodes,
and if you don't know why you're here,
well, neither do we. But
just click the button.
Oh no. Anyways, creatures.
Yes. Rawr.
So, like last week, we looked into the Lazarus taxon, and what animals or creatures are, still or either live past their extinction date or continue to live past when they were thought to have died out.
It was a very interesting topic.
And especially tying it in with the biblical story of Lazarus.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why we talked about it, which we'll get into, promise. Especially when we get into some of the creatures that, are more fantastical, whatever you want to call it. So you have your dragons, you have your dinosaurs, you have like all these things that they surely couldn't have lived with humans or different things like that. But let's take a look at some of those things. So that's kind of what the series is kind of doing, just for the fact that we're nerds and we like thinking that, dragons and humans, awesome. Never mind the fact that, humans typically hunted down those said dragons and slayed them for, glory and honor and whatever. I'm a fellow dragon lover here. We don't want the poor dragons to suffer.
I too was once hunted for glory and fame and honor. And without further ado,
We are the hiccups of the world.
I was implying I'm a cryptid.
I mean, you could do whatever you want.
Spooky.
Woo!
Michigan dog mans. That's not me, but
Or is it?
distant cousin.
Anyway, we're getting off topic.
No.
I mean,
we
we're
gotta pad the runtime.
okay, well, we are on topic, but we're not. Anyway,
We're on topic, but on a different subset of topic.
so before we also talked about the different locations that are like not necessarily fully explored, different things like that, places where things could still be lurking, whether that's megafauna or whatever. That'll be up to interpretation discussion at a future time when we actually get to some of these creatures. But this week we'll be talking yet again about another biblical story, and one that I think leads into some of the discussions of, say, dinosaurs and dragons and stuff like that. Which maybe people wouldn't necessarily immediately think of this when thinking of things in the Bible for creatures, is Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14, which is a list of clean and unclean animals that was provided to the people of Israel. And within it, there is a certain, or maybe two certain animals that they don't really know the origin of.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, all the things in the Old Testament were written in Hebrew, or ancient Hebrew. And they only have so many words in Hebrew. So, translating and everything, they came up with a good chunk. There's a couple of things they still don't really know what they mean.
Yeah. It's kind of a guessing game a little bit.
Yeah.
What is this actually?
And especially cross-referencing for what we do know, kind of looking backward. But obviously, I know English, so I don't know Hebrew as much. I'm learning Hebrew, but I'm no expert. Neither of us are experts. Sorry to disappoint you guys. It is what it is. Our feeble minds can only conjure up so much. And it's not even conjuring after that point. Anyways, without further ado, Leviticus 11, Deuteronomy 14. We'll first read it, and then I think what something is interesting is we'll try to show the differences between the different translations.
Yeah.
As I think that can point out a couple things between it. And we went with 4, or at least I went with 4. I had Jonathan take a different one that he didn't have on the list that I made. And I went after the ones that I know what people read the most.
Yeah.
At least in the circles that I've been a part of. So I went and made a list of those, and the ones that I made the list of go as follows: the NIV, the KJV, or also known as King James, the NASB, and the ESV, extra spiritual version.
Yes, the one that
I
used in college.
I know it's not called the extra spiritual version, but I always like saying it because it's funny.
Well, and it makes sense, like I said, when again, going off on a tangent, it's kind of funny, but that was what we used in college. It wasn't required, but it's what all of our assignments used for referencing, and so it was just like, and I guess this is the easiest one to use.
and I know with translations, there's a couple that are like word for word translation. There's a couple that are phrase to phrase translation. This is kind of a mix of the two. So you're getting a little bit of both. Obviously, we're kind of looking more at a word for word.
Right.
In particular, like with the creatures themselves, because it's not a phrase kind of thing. But you'll see a lot of similarities with them anyways. With a couple, with mainly one exception to that. but we'll kind of go into it. And I don't know. Do you want to read it in NLT, which is the one
so
that you have?
New Living Translation.
Yeah.
So I guess, do you want me to start with Leviticus or Deuteronomy, or doesn't
It doesn't matter. They're like the same thing.
Okay. The entire
How far does it go?
47 verses.
Okay, maybe we won't.
Why don't we read the parts that are, what's the word I'm thinking of?
Je ne sais quoi.
They have
a little bit of that je ne sais quoi.
More pertinent to the conversation, so specifically about the different animals. Does that work?
Or we could just go by the animals themselves.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so again, New Living Translation.
And we're going straight from animals, so like something like fish. We're not counting, because it's not a direct animal per se. Obviously, there's a couple of things that kind of go against that, but we'll get into it.
Yeah. So again, for reference, if you want to follow along, we're not going to be reading the whole thing because it's long. But Leviticus 11, Deuteronomy 14, that's where we're at in Scripture. So again, this is New Living Translation, and it starts talking about the different animals. So you've got the hyrax.
Well, it starts first and foremost with camel.
That's right, camel. Hyrax is where my eyes immediately went. My old man eyes. You've got, yes, camel, hyrax, rabbit, pig, and then you're going to have to, because you've got the list of all.
Yeah,
so if I miss one, please let me know. Yes, eagle, the vulture, the black vulture, the red kite, any kind of black kite, any kind of raven, the horned owl, the screech owl, the gull, any kind of hawk, the little owl, the cormorant, the great owl, the white owl, the desert owl, the osprey, the stork, any kind of heron, the what I can't pronounce, the hoopoe, and the bat. And then you've got your insects, so
any locust,
katydid, cricket, or grasshopper. And then they mention any flying insects that have 4 legs are unclean.
Yeah.
Then
it goes to more of the animals.
Yep. Like you got weasel,
mammal.
Yeah.
Well, mammal lizards, that kind of thing.
The mammal lizard.
Mammal lizard.
So you got the weasel,
the lizard.
The rat. You got that je ne sais quoi. The weasel, the rat, any kind of great lizard, the gecko, the monitor lizard, the wall lizard, the skink, the chameleon.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah, so
big list.
So we'll go through them with the different things I have. Now, funnily enough, and we looked at this right before recording, the NIV and the NLT share the exact same thing.
Yeah.
They're exactly the same.
Yay!
Yay!
Consistency.
So I'll go, and I'll also have NIV in here to go along with it. So, and I'm going to say them in the order they appear in Scripture for every single one. They follow the same path.
Yeah.
So, for the first one, everything's camel. All the translations say camel. So camel's definitely there. And which makes sense. Yeah. Middle East, camel. They're still there. Then the next one, it's called different things, but it's exactly the same animal.
Yeah.
I did some research looking it up. So that's the hyrax, the rock hyrax, the coney, or the rock badger. They're all the same thing.
Different names for the same
They're just different. I mean, there's slight differences, but it's the same thing.
You're nitpicking at that point.
Yeah. Having wow. I butchered that. The rabbit or the hare. They're the same thing. Pig or swine, again, same thing. King James like being fancy. Say swine.
Ah, yes, the swine.
Swine. All the eagle is the same for everything. And then it differentiates again. So where NLT says vulture. The NIV also says vulture. King James says ossifrage. NASB says vulture. ESV, bearded vulture. I found out bearded vulture and ossifrage, same thing. And the vulture could honestly be the same thing there as well.
So very similar, just different wording.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Then the next one, the black vulture.
Yep.
So what's the difference between the black vulture and the ossifrage or the vulture? I'm not too sure, but there's different vultures in the area.
It was important enough to be mentioned.
Yeah. So black vulture, King James says osprey, the NASB says buzzard, and the ESV says black vulture. Now, I am no bird connoisseur or enthusiast, so some of these differences, I'm not too sure what they are. And for some of these things, I don't even know what they look like to begin with. So, hey, look them up if you are interested, because I didn't even know what they were to begin with. Speaking of, so the NLT and the NIV both say red kite for the next one. No idea what that was. It's more like a hawk.
Oh, interesting.
It's more of like a hawk. Once I kind of looked into it, it's a bird of prey. It's a bird of prey. Which makes sense of why it's unclean. And then King James says vulture. And then the NASB says red kite. And the ESV says any kite. And no, not the flying ones that you fly at the park. I mean, obviously you wouldn't want to eat those either, but I digress.
Don't criticize my diet plan.
Okay. So, then the next one, any black kite.
Yep.
Similar with NLT, that's NIV. King James is any kite, so they don't want you eating kites either. NASB, any falcon, and that's the same as the ESV, any falcon. Okay. Because ESV already said any kite, so.
Yeah.
And then the next one for everything is any raven. So ravens, no. Then it starts to get real interesting. Because then it starts to kind of get wacky a little bit. So for the next one, horned owl for both NIV and NLT. Owl for King James. And ostrich for both NASB and ESV. Which, okay, I could see ostrich being there, but why is that in the same spot as owls?
Yeah.
A horned owl and an owl. A horned owl, I don't think, is an ostrich.
If you ain't really, hard, maybe not. Just
so this is when it kind of gets a little bit confusing a little bit. Because there's quite a few owls on here.
Yeah. Gotta cover all
some of them are in comparison to some of the other ones, I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, the next one, screech owl for NIV, nighthawk for both the King James and the ESV, and the regular owl for NASB. And then the next one, you got the gull for the NIV, seagull for the NASB and the ESV, so they're the same thing. And cuckoo for King James. Which I don't know if that's the same thing, just a different variant or something.
How do you spell it? Does it say?
Yes, Cuckow.
Like that?
OW.
OW?
I mean, it's probably it's probably like that.
Roadrunners. It's a bird.
It's a bird. It fits with the bird category of.
Yeah.
They're listing off a bunch of birds at this point.
It's an unclean bird. It's nasty.
Don't eat it. It hits out on its feet. Don't eat it. Then the next one gets better. Any hawk. I like it when they do that, where it's like, this is definitely what this is.
Don't do this.
The next one's similar. All say little owl. Now, what does little owl mean? It's just a small owl. At least for what I know. Unless there is something called a little owl.
My mind just immediately goes to like, oh, it's just one of the smaller owls. But I don't know.
Is there something like a pygmy owl or something like that?
There might be.
That'd be adorable.
I can be your little Google search guy while you're doing this. Pygmy owl. Northern pygmy owl. But I doubt that was...
I doubt that's what they're talking about.
No.
How small is it?
These are mostly small owls.
Mostly small.
Yeah.
Well, we need something that's like in the Middle East area.
Small owls.
Well, just look up
the Middle East.
Just look up little owl. Or
the little owl. Yeah, it's actually.
it's actually called the little owl.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, there you go.
And that's what we get for overthinking.
Yep. It's little owl. Man, someone was a genius when they said that. It's a little owl. It's a perfect name.
He's small.
He's a small
He's
owl.
a tiny little guy.
Next one is a cormorant.
Mm-hmm.
That's in everything. They eat fish in the water. And then this next one, they don't really know what the origin kind of is. It's the great owl. So, that was something interesting that I found when I looked it up.
Yeah.
Though the ESV actually says something different. So it doesn't say great owl. It says short-eared owl.
Interesting. But the other translations
the other translations are consistent with great owl, though they don't necessarily know what great owl is. Because I tried looking it up myself as well. There's nothing called a great owl.
Yeah.
Over there. Yeah, they have the little owl, but not the great owl.
That is really interesting.
So, and obviously it's not the great horned owl. It's completely different.
Yeah.
Even though it has great in the name. My guess, and I guess we can talk about it now. Like, yeah, what do you think it could be? It could
kind of my, nerd, like, brain goes to, like, maybe it's some sort of large owl that isn't around any longer. That's where my mind goes immediately. Is that the case? I don't know. But it is interesting that
it could just be a larger owl.
Yeah.
Kind of like how the great horned owl is a big owl.
Yeah, so it could be very general too. But it is interesting that
the fact
they can't seem to place it, with the exception of the ESV, which has
short-eared owl,
which is very specific. But it is also odd that if it was so general, and I guess in some cases it is, but in some places, it's very specific about it's this type,
especially if it's like any this.
Yeah,
that's what I feel like is more of a generalization.
Yeah. But here they list off a bunch of different types of owls, and then
it could
great
be
owl, and we don't know.
It's like a different species of great owl. Well, what is a great owl? Who knows?
Yeah. So like you said, it could just be a big type.
It could just be a big owl. And something that I find interesting, especially kind of looking back at some of the other translations, let's say going back to ostrich.
Yeah.
When they're talking about, let's say, the horned owl for the NIV and owl for King James.
Yeah.
Well, ostriches aren't owls per se, but they're giant land birds.
Yeah.
What if this great owl
is just
had of characteristics? Owls are birds of prey.
Mm-hmm.
And they see by sight. What if it's just a really big bird of prey?
And it could be that too, yeah.
They just called it and lumped it in with an owl.
Mm-hmm.
Which, obviously, we don't know.
We weren't there.
We weren't there. Kind of be cool to be there, but yeah, kind of not, because I know some of the things that were back then. I'd rather not. But it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Because I think of, let's say, the terror bird in South America. Different things like that. Now, obviously, that looks nothing like an owl, let's say. but it is a giant bird of prey that went really fast.
Mhm.
Obviously, in Africa or Middle East, it would maybe look a little bit different and be more adapt to some of these other things. Now, what does it look like? I don't know.
Yeah.
And obviously, we're kind of just spitballing here.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, I think there's, again, like you said, maybe they just lumped it in with owls. I don't know.
which is fair. Like, if something shares a lot of similarities
Right.
with things, it would
But I
lump
think
it together.
the one thing we can be absolutely sure
It's a
of is
bird.
it's a bird and it's a bird of prey because that's what's consistent.
Yes. So, do with that whatever you want.
If anybody has any insight that we don't or that we missed, leave a comment.
Which, yeah, because I've been doing like research like for a couple of years, just my own stuff. So
Yeah.
obviously I'm not like any professional or anything
Yeah.
in the field or anything. But I always thought it was interesting that this, and we'll get to the other
The
one.
other one. People can't
But
seem to.
this one, I was kind of shocked that they don't know what this is.
Yeah.
Because the other one, I can make an argument to what it could be.
It's a lot easier to
It's a lot,
speculate.
yeah, it's a lot easier to speculate. Whereas this one, I don't know. I feel like you would know.
Yeah.
So.
Well, because initially when you say great owl,
You're like, oh, okay, it's an owl.
It's an owl. Maybe there's a type of great, and then you look it up, and it's like, wait, there's not something called a great owl. What is that? And nobody seems to be able to place it, as far as we know.
Yeah,
that's not to say that somebody hasn't placed it. We didn't see anything.
And then for the next one, white owl for NIV and NASB, barn owl for ESV, which is still a white owl, and then swan for King James.
King James.
Which one of these is not like the other? I don't really have anything necessarily bad to say about the King James, but I feel like there's a large group of people that like swear by the King James of this is the most accurate because it's the oldest sounding one. I guess you'll say by how it's got character. We'll say. I just don't think it's the most accurate translation.
That's fair, yeah.
Based on all the other translations I've used the King James, but I feel like other ones are, like, personally for me, I read NASB and NIV. NIV because I grew up with it.
Yeah.
NASB because I think it's one of the more accurate ones.
Right.
But obviously, I have one for more accurate word by word and phrase by phrase. So I use like NIV, NASB, different things like that. But I also like cross-referencing. So,
which is what we're doing now.
Yeah,
it's cross-referencing, and it is King James likes to do its own thing a lot.
Yeah. Swan, I don't really get it. Yeah. I mean, sure, swans could have been in the area, but a white owl makes more sense considering we're talking about owls for these past couple. And yeah. So anyway, the next one, desert owl.
We're back to the owls.
By the NIV.
Yeah.
The ESV says tawny owl.
Okay.
Which I'm not too sure what that is. Desert owl, well, it's in the desert, and they're in the wilderness or whatever at this point, so makes sense. Then King James and the NASB say pelican.
That is a strange one.
But the pelican does still make sense to me.
Okay.
Especially being kind of close to the Mediterranean.
Sure.
In that area of the wilderness. Kind of like the Sea of Reeds area. So it makes sense. It is a little odd to be kind of lumped with owls still, but this is also the end of when they would talk about owls. So, I don't know. It's a little odd.
It wouldn't be surprising either that a pelican would be considered unclean. Again, it's...
Yeah. And I don't know. And it's not King James on its lonely island this time. It's NASB, which I trust a little bit more, is also saying it. So, yeah. Anyway, then the next one. So, again, going back to the birds. NIV, osprey, or however you want to say it. Uh, the King James is the gyre eagle,
Okay.
so a specific type of eagle, which I don't think is much different than what was the osprey.
Yeah.
And then the carrion vulture for NASB and ESV.
Yeah. Any type of vulture, any sort of carrion animal, immediately
It's
like
gonna be on the
it
list.
makes sense.
And obviously, there's other animals that they lump into categories in there. They also for fish. We're just not naming them. So, like, obviously, some of them, like, it has to have hooves and choose the cud, different things like that to be able to be clean, and anything that doesn't follow that, So, continuing on with our birds. The next one is stork for everything.
Yeah.
Next one, any heron for everything. Then you have a hoopoe for the NIV, the NASB, and the ESV. Lapwing for the King James.
Interesting.
I don't really know what any of them are. I looked them up. I still don't really know. They're birds. I'm not a bird connoisseur, like I said before, but anyway.
Were you able to figure out, like, is a lapwing and a hoopoe completely different animal types of birds, or is it
I want to say they're kind.
Or are they similar?
I think they're similar.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure because I never really truly looked them up.
Sure.
But
curious.
But the one I do know that is similar is the next one, which is bat.
Yeah.
Everything's shared there. Same with any locust that's shared. Katydid is not. Katydid is only for the NIV and the NLT.
Interesting.
King James says any bald locust, and same with ESV. NASB is any devastating locust.
Interesting.
Which is interesting. So I'm assuming it's another locust at this point, not a katydid.
Right. The katydid was maybe used. I don't know.
But either way, it's still in that area.
Kind of category of.
Next one, any cricket is done by the NIV, NLT, NASB, and the ESV. Any beetle is the King James.
Okay.
Which, okay. I don't necessarily disagree with it, but it ain't a cricket.
Yeah.
But I'm not harping on it too much. It's still an insect, at least.
Mm-hmm.
After we get past the any grasshopper, which is next, which is everything, then we get interesting things from King James. Or at least we start getting in that direction.
Yeah.
So the first one is weasel for the NIV, the NLT, and the King James.
Yeah.
NASB says mole.
Okay.
And the ESV says mole rat. Which
I can see
that. I can see it for all of them. Yeah.
It makes sense.
The next one, rat, mouse, mouse, mouse. It's the same thing. And then here is the other one that they do not know what it is. Any great lizard.
I wonder what that is. Now, again, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but this one is a little easier to speculate on.
And obviously the science community is like, oh no, they surely didn't exist at the same time. To me, this is dinosaur.
Yeah. My mind goes to dinosaur, but I could also see the argument for, it could be a crocodile or...
And there's a reason why I don't think that, because in next couple ones, they show the other things it could be. So, well, you wouldn't say the same thing twice. I mean, sure, they did it for like an owl or whatever, but this is a generalization here.
With great lizard,
With great lizard. Now, the King James doesn't say any great lizard, they just say tortoise. It's not even an any whatever.
Tortoises are big.
It's the only one that isn't a generalization, but the other ones are a generalization.
They all use great lizard, yeah.
And they don't know what it is. To me, obviously, dinosaur wasn't coined until way, way in the future.
So how do you describe this?
And everybody would say like even dinosaur itself is terrible lizard.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's a great lizard? Well, it's a really big lizard. And if it's not, say, a crocodile, like a Nile crocodile,
Sure.
or a monitor lizard of some sort, which we'll see later, actually,
Right. Then what is
so
it?
what is it?
Yeah.
So you have two options here. For me, dinosaur, which is far more likely, or if you want to go the other route, dragons. Which, obviously people are going to lash back at that one a little bit. And I would too to some. I'd say dinosaur is a far more likely option here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what else it could be, to be honest. And I'll explain that as we go further along. The next one, gecko, which is another lizard.
Yep.
Which
They're getting more specific.
they're getting more into more of the lizard kind of
We would know
more
is
reptile stuff. Yeah. Besides the King James, which goes ferret. But that everybody else says gecko. The next one, monitor lizard for the NIV, and that's the same for the NLT. Chameleon for the King James, it's its own thing. Crocodile for the NASB.
Okay, interesting.
And monitor lizard for the ESV. Okay.
Which
What?
one used crocodile?
NASB,
NASB.
which is what I think is a more accurate one.
Interesting.
So there goes crocodile or monitor lizard, one of the two.
Mm-hmm. See, because I understand when you said dragons, but again, I would push back on that one.
Yeah.
Because my mind immediately goes, well, I think you can make the argument
make
for
it a
crocodile,
crocodile.
but if it's used in another translation, that's where I feel like the argument might start to fall apart a little bit.
That's why I don't think it's a crocodile or a monitor lizard, because they're used in both of these
and they're
instances.
used in other.
Now, obviously, they don't use both monitor lizard and crocodile in the same instance.
But they're both used in other translations.
They're both used
so
in other translations.
there was
on
enough
top of
evidence when translating scripture that they were like, it could reasonably be this, but here's great lizard.
What is great lizard?
Yeah, we don't know. You see that? Yeah, that makes sense.
And what makes it interesting is the next one they have is just regular old lizard.
That is incredibly generalized.
So you have wall lizard, let's say, for NIV, which, okay, it's a wizard. It's a lizard that you see. It's a wizard.
You're a wizard, Harry.
It's one that you see like on your house or something, like you're a Knowles or,
Yeah.
Well, I say gecko, but it's another type of lizard that,
Very standard.
yeah. It's another difference between any great lizard. This is just lizard.
Yeah.
Which is very generalized. It doesn't say any lizard. It just says lizard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So think of your stereotypical lizard. That's what I think of, at least.
Yes. It would be a very,
Small,
very
on the
common,
smaller size. Yeah. Then your next one, you get sand reptile, which is very generic again.
Yeah.
For both ESV and NASB. You get skink for the NIV and the NLT, and you get snail for the King James.
Mm-hmm.
This is really where the King James just, I don't know where they're going with some of these things. Snail's not even similar at all. Skink doesn't necessarily fit either, but sand reptile makes sense. You're in the desert.
Yeah.
You're in that kind of area. And then the last one. So all of these are said in all four. Chameleon for the NIV, the NASB, and ESV, which King James already said chameleon. They just said it earlier. They say mole this time. And mole has already been said in other translations as well. So I don't necessarily disagree with that. I just think placing was maybe wrong there.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't fit at all with the chameleon. But they're at least all there.
Right.
But yeah, so any great lizard.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Especially with seeing crocodile and monitor lizard both there.
See, and I had completely,
That's why I like looking at the different translations as well. So, okay. So that leads me to believe the one that's translated into monitor lizard or crocodile, that's a bigger lizard that you would see.
Yes.
Well, then what's a great lizard?
Mm-hmm.
And no, it's not a tortoise.
Again, and it goes back to, well, why can't it be the tortoise? Well, the King James version seems to be the least consistent with the other translations, and for me, that's, I can't speak for you, but that's where I would kind of be like,
Yeah.
Majority rules here.
Yeah,
That's kind of where I would lean.
And it falls flat on a couple of things. It's fairly consistent earlier on, but once it hits this last stretch, it just doesn't hold up as well.
And there's some areas where maybe it says something different, but I could still see where they, came up with it. Like, it makes sense, but then, like you said, there's other places where it's just, okay, what are you trying to say here? What's going on?
And it's like, obviously, they would have known what a crocodile is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
Sobek, Nile crocodile. They would have seen it.
Mm-hmm.
They would know what that is. So why would you say any great lizard at that point? When there's only one crocodile.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the Nile crocodile. You would know what that is. So you would say it.
So the assumption would have to be that this is something larger.
I would say it'd be something larger.
Yeah.
Now, other people might not have that opinion, and maybe people don't like the take that, dinosaurs walked alongside humans. I don't think that's far-fetched. And honestly, even today, I think some walk around with humans. Is it the same as, what we see in the fossil record or anything like that?
Well, and that's what we have to... What you could even think about, too, is... When they say great lizard, are they referring to... I would assume dinosaurs, but are they talking T-Rex? I don't know. Maybe not, but...
I don't know if T-Rex would have been around at that point.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is it the dinosaurs you immediately think of, or is it...
The survive it would be the classifications that could have still been around.
Exactly, and that's what I'm trying to say is I'm not necessarily thinking Jurassic Park sort of.
Yeah, we're not saying that every dinosaur at this point is alive still.
Yeah,
I think they definitely were a Lazarus taxon. They lived far beyond what we think they did. Mm-hmm. That's my opinion. They lived far beyond where we think they died off.
Yeah.
I think they lived far longer, and in certain areas. They became far more extant than they did extinct.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the meteorite impact or whatever that came, I do think that definitely culled a large number of them.
Sure.
And took a lot of them out. Because it did affect world climate, everything, ice age, all that kind of stuff.
And we can see that.
We see that. There are a couple of places that weren't affected by some of these climate changes all that much. One of them being Africa, which we'll get into in future episodes toward different things that I think could still be out there. But it's interesting that Africa is one that relatively remained unchanged for a lot of things. Now, there are a key couple of things that changed. Obviously, one of them being the Sahara. Mm-hmm. The Sahara used to be a giant rainforest. It is now a giant desert. It underwent desertification.
Desertification.
Can't even say it. Desertification.
Yum.
Yummy. And obviously that has to do with everything changing around them, different weather environments by moving continents, different things, continental drift, all that kind of stuff, where it changes weather patterns, everything. And one of the things to go, the Sahara. There's some speculation there could have been a river that ran through. Some people even have Atlantis as being in that area, which I don't know about that. But having a ancient riverbed underneath all the sand, that could make sense. Being in there to trigger this this rainforest or whatever it would have been.
Right.
And I can see that. Obviously, the Earth is constantly changing, and I think it changes a lot quicker than people think it does. Um, everybody nowadays is saying, "Oh, climate change." Well, they used to say global warming, which is a load of crap. And I'm saying this as like somebody who went into geology. Climate change itself, well, that's a thing because that's just normal. We're technically in one of the heating trends, which, because we're coming out of an ice age, makes sense when you look at the grand scheme of, geologic time, if you want to look at it that way. So when people are like freaking out, like, oh my goodness, the ice cap's going to melt. Yeah, well, during the Cretaceous, there wasn't really an ice cap. It was melted. So, yeah, I mean, your normal that you're used to is changing, sure. But that's just how it goes with the Earth. It's constantly changing. If you expect everything to remain exactly the same as it was, well,
you're in for a rude awakening.
You're in for a shock. But yeah, so again, next week we'll be talking about dinosaurs.
Yes, I love dinosaurs. I was a dinosaur kid growing up, so I'm excited.
And this is why I wanted to bring up this passage here, because I think this is the biblical representation of dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cave paintings and stuff like that, I don't necessarily have proof or pictures of it by recording this episode or whatever.
We can get there for next week, though.
There's stuff like dinosaurs and stuff depicted in some of these cave paintings and other things. Like, what else could that be?
Yeah.
And different things. And what I think the dragon originated from is dinosaurs. And the last remnants of them, at least. Now, a good majority of them, are they still around? No. No, they're not. Whether that's hunted to extinction, inevitably climate would take out probably the last remaining few, just because global temperature is far lower than it was. And I think also food source is gone because everything's shrinking. So your big T-Rexes and stuff, they can't sustain it. They shrink. Or the greenery, let's say, that the different big herbivorous dinosaurs would have feasted on, not really there anymore.
Yeah.
Though in places, I think there are.
Yeah, and I was curious if you were going to bring this up.
Which we'll get to that.
Yeah.
The reason I have the Congo as one of them is
which we talked about last week.
Which we talked about is one of those last remaining places. A, relatively untouched.
Mm-hmm.
B, has local accounts of something that is sauropod-like in the Congo rainforest, the Mokele-Mbembe. Interesting, and they're pretty dang accurate with their animals that they hunted, like the pygmy hunters and whatever that are in the area, because they found the okapi, or okapi, or however you say it. Scientists thought, what a load of junk. They don't know what they're talking about until they found one. And they're like, oh.
Maybe we should be listening.
They were stinking accurate. It looks exactly how they described it. Well, how they described the Mokele-Mbembe looks exactly like a sauropod. Like dinosaur, apatosaurus-like.
Yeah.
Obviously, do I think it's as large as a apatosaurus? Do I think it's a apatosaurus? No.
But is it something...
But is it a sauropod of some sort? Yes.
Yeah.
And if I believe them as they were accurate about the other. And why aren't we taking it seriously? Oh, because it's only by anecdotal evidence by that point.
But you can make the same argument for the last one, too.
Yeah, you could say the last one until they actually found one.
Yeah.
Send
in the explorers. See what happens. Well,
the reason why they don't is because it's dangerous.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
It's very dangerous. There's caimans, there's crocs, there's all these things.
We touched on it last week. I mean, the Congo is, it's, you go in, you might not be coming out.
Well, and the thing, it's not small.
No.
It's a large area. And to think like, oh yeah, we know everything above the water. It's not true.
Yeah, how deep was the river? Do you remember?
700 something feet.
Yeah. What's down there?
730 plus. I don't know what's down there. I mean, it could be nothing,
but
it could also house
we don't
something.
know.
But we don't know.
Because we haven't.
It's harder to reach.
Yeah.
And the reason why I don't think dinosaurs are in the Amazon is because it's too separate.
Mm-hmm.
It's too separate. Things would have died off. Whereas Africa, for example, well, they kind of were confined into this area because of the deserts all around them, right? Which you could maybe say the same thing about the Amazon because mountains are all around them, or water. Which is why it's isolated. Again, it could also house something. I don't know if dinosaurs are there, but who knows? It's very dense, whatever, and massive. But again, that's getting into the weeds. We'll get more into dinosaurs next week and kind of talk about what we think the chances of them still being around are. Obviously, we kind of said our little bit of 2 cents here. Obviously, does this apply to all dinosaurs? No.
No, and that's why I brought it up earlier, because you're going to have, not that we have people commenting, but you know, theoretically you'll have that one guy going, it's like, that's not what we
You're not going to see a T-Rex just walking around with humans. No.
And so I just wanted to make our position clear with that. Yeah, they're not talking about the T-Rex. At least I don't think so.
No. Was there carnivorous dinosaurs at this point? Yes.
But
what they were, I'm not sure.
And maybe that's something to look into. Maybe we can.
There's a couple that people speculate some other things to be, especially in Europe.
Sure. With
the Byronics being one of them, as what they think is more dragon-like. Which dinosaurs and dragons are very, very similar, which is why I have them scheduled right next to each other.
I love dragons.
I've always liked dinosaurs. I've always liked dragons. So why not both? And were dinosaurs different than dragons? Why did dragons get personified with wings? Why was that? So that's some of the things we'll look into then. And obviously we'll look into the differences in what dinosaurs have to offer. But, yeah. I guess going back into the scripture that we're reading, the reason behind saying these animals, for example, is what is clean and unclean. So what's ceremoniously clean? What can you partake of? What should you let into your body? Whereas, what are the things you should avoid? Which basically is revolved around the bloodshedding and everything of everything else.
Yeah.
Or wallows in the dirt, mud, whatever you want. So what are things that you don't go for anything that's basically a prey. Or not prey. Preys on other
predator.
things. Predator. Because it spills the blood of other.
And you see that again
animals.
in birds of prey. They mentioned crocodile, all of those things. I mean,
yeah. And like obviously they go for hoof. Like what is clean is hoofed animals that chew the cud, different things like that. So that's your cows, your sheep, those kind of things.
But then you've got your unclean, like pigs and
and things that are also clean, like doves. Like different things they use for like sacrificial rituals, for example. Those things were clean. Because they weren't birds of prey. Doves, pigeons, those kind of things.
But it's interesting too, some of those things like sheep and doves are also often used symbolically to represent holiness and, stuff like that too. Throughout scripture, which is another interesting little piece to it.
Yeah, and I think even for the clean and unclean, the reason why this was there is to kind of God saying, "Hey, this is you're set apart.
Mhm.
Like, do a little bit differently." And now some of these things we can look back and say, "Oh, well, maybe that's just better hygiene practice." Like, oh, if you do something, like if you touch something unclean, like blood of another animal or blood whatever,
You could get
you have to
sick.
get ceremoniously clean afterward. So you have to go through a purifying ritual, like go into the bath and mikvah, go through all that kind of stuff to be clean, be cleansed.
Yeah.
It's like it's kind of a sanitary thing.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Different things like that. There's other things that make sense.
There's many
with it.
facets.
There's
to it.
there's many facets to it, other than just this is who you are. And the reason why it's interesting is because later on with Jesus, veil was torn. These different things that were set before, like, oh, you have to follow these food examples, for example.
These ceremonial laws, these
ceremonial laws are no more.
Yeah.
Because I am now with you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the difference there becomes apparent. But I thought it'd be interesting. Take a look at the different translations, especially within Leviticus 11, Deuteronomy 14. I've always been interested in it, not just because there's a bunch of animals that are listed and I'm just trying to figure out what they are, but that's where any great lizard comes in, that they, don't know what it means. They don't know what it translates to because the translation doesn't exist. Maybe because, dinosaur didn't exist until like 1826 or something.
Right.
Even dragon predates dragon. Because we know dragon, because dragon appears in the Bible, in the book of Revelation, which is the New Testament during the time of Roman occupation.
Right.
And we know in Rome, dragon was used. Draco. All that kind of stuff. So
they have a reference point.
They have a reference point to pull from.
Whereas in the Hebrew,
the Hebrew, no, wasn't there. Which makes it interesting. So next week we'll get into dinosaurs. I'm really looking forward to it. We'll go into some of our favorite dinosaurs. I've got a couple. I could honestly talk videos just on these separate dinosaurs. We're not going to, but we'll get into it. I have a couple of classification stuff I have in a slideshow that I have, but we'll talk about dinosaurs, a couple things about them, what we think their chances of still being around are, what ones we do think would be around, different things like that. We'll get into that next week. So that'll be it for this video. Thank you again for watching. Hopefully you'll join us next week. And leave a comment down below if you have any more insight into, like, say, what a great owl is, or any great lizard, what else it could be. Obviously, I also had the same thought of, well, what if it could also mean crocodile? Until I looked it up in other translation and found crocodile already on there. I'm like, oh, I see. Interesting. But anyway, that'll be it, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, guys.
See ya.